Good morning again. We're still morning, right? Still got it. Testing Division schedules about 52,000 exams annually and tests nearly every business day of the year. In addition to administering those 46 examinations at our 8 test centers, we also develop the exams. Most applicants are required to take a law and business exam as well as their specific trade. All of these exams are based on occupational analyses of those trades, which provide a current description of construction work performed by contractors in each trade, and we keep all 46 of the exams updated on a 5 to 7 year cycle. In August, we released the C10, a new version of the C10 exam and electrical, and new C22 asbestos abatement exam. And as you can see from the table on page 171, 5 exam programs are in the occupational analysis phase, 7 are in the development phase. In addition to this, we are holding many code workshops special to prepare us for January when the new building codes become effective. In August, I was able to attend the annual NASCLA convention and went to the examination program committee meeting. They're in the process of updating their commercial general building exam. Some states have begun administering the 3 new electrical exams. And lastly, on their radar next is to develop an HVAC mechanical exam. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Any comments from the board? Any comments from public? Thank you, Wendy. Next agenda item is item 5, a review and discussion and possible action on to amend the licensing 2019 to 2021 strategic plan objectives. You can see the updates on page 174. Justin, can you give us an update on item 1.5 related to multiple qualifiers and bonding requirements?
Certainly. 1.5 was a strategic objective that this board identified. In the course of the last year, the legislature, through our sunset bill, identified a similar thing, a similar priority specifically with bonding that they'd like the board to examine. The actual sunset bill created a specific reporting deadline of that, which is basically 2021, the beginning of 2021. So we'd like to just amend the strategic plan so that we can do what was being asked for in the specific sunset bill as part of the strategic plan objective. Happy to answer any questions.
Any board members have any questions? Anybody from the public? No? Can I get a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
Thank you.
Do you mind just reading the motion just briefly?
Amend the licensing 2019-2021 strategic plan objective 1.5 target date to January 2021. Everybody good with that?
My apologies.
Again, any board member comments and or public comment? No. Kayla?
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Ray Cochamura.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
David Diaz.
Yes.
Susan Granzella. Mike Layton. Nancy Springer. Motion carries.
There's one other item on this strategic plan to discuss. That's item 1.6 relating to outsourcing test administration. Justin, can you give us an update?
Certainly. Over the course of the summer, staff finalized a cost-benefit analysis on outsourcing exam administration, and we were preparing to present to the licensing committee meeting that occurred in August. As we were preparing this, we learned that the Department of Consumer Affairs and their current vendor, PSI Exams, are renegotiating fees. Those fees, what those fees actually result in is quite important to determining which is going to be your cheaper option. Based on that, staff requested of the board to postpone the delivery of this item until we could get a better fixed date. We've met, David, Tanya and I have met with PSI Exams over the phone to discuss what that fee structure is going to look like. I'll actually be meeting with the department's exam unit in the coming weeks to discuss where their negotiations are, but we're fairly confident we can give you a good estimate of what that cost will be by our December board meeting. For that reason, we're asking that the strategic plan just be updated to give a December deadline. Happy to answer any questions.
Make a motion to move item 1.6 to December 19.
Actually, you jumped ahead.
I apologize.
With regard to this item, the licensing made the following motion: direct staff to do no further work on the cost-benefit analysis for outsourcing exam administration at this time, but report to the board in December of 2019 on a new cost-benefit analysis and the feasibility of outsourcing based on new exam fees. Do board members have any questions or comments? Does the public have any questions or comments? Okay. The licensing committee's recommendation comes to the board as a fully formed motion, so no first or second is necessary before we vote on this motion. At this time, I will take board member questions or comments on this item. Again, do any board members have a comment? Nancy.
I hate to say this, can you read that again?
The motion?
Before the motion, what you were describing there?
The licensing committee recommended?
Yeah.
Recommendation comes to the board as a fully formed motion, so no first or second is necessary before we vote on this motion. You keep going. At this time, I will take board members' questions and comments on this item. And that's your question? Oh, okay.
Here. Do you want, so under Robert's Rules of Order, when a committee of the board moves something forward, then it's a fully formed motion. You don't need a
Right.
first or second.
It wasn't that, it was something you'd said before that on describing what the motion was.
Direct staff to do no further work on the cost of benefit analysis for outsourcing, exam administration at this time, but report to the board in December 2019 on a new cost benefit analysis and feasibility of outsourcing based on the new exam fees.
So new cost, okay.
Okay, again, does the board member have any comments? Public have any comment? Kayla?
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Frank Altamura.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
David Diaz.
Yes.
Susan Granzola. Mike Layton.
Aye.
Nancy Springer. Motion carries.
That concludes the licensing committee
Thank you.
report.
Before we move on, is there any other board comment on licensing? Is there any other board comment on licensing? Is there any public comment on licensing? Okay, let's move on to legislation, page 180. And for that, we're going to turn it over to our legislative committee chair, Augie Beltran.
Thank you, Chair. Now we're under Agenda Item G, Legislation Program Update. First item, review, discussion, and possible approval of August 6th, 2019 Legislative Committee Meeting Summary Report. But before we discuss approving the August 6th, 2019 Legislative Committee Meeting Summary Report, a brief update on the primary subject of that meeting, energy storage systems, is warranted. That brings us to Agenda Item G1 on page 179 of your packet. Status update on Ledge Committee meeting motion regarding appropriation classifications to install battery energy storage systems. Now, the motion that the Ledge Committee adopted at that meeting is as follows. Recommend directing staff to prepare regulatory language to permit the C46 solar contractor classification to install battery energy systems, ESS, on specific residential units with restrictions, with the further recommendation that staff study ESS size, complexity, voltage, and risk, and bring it back to this committee. At the August 6th Ledge Committee meeting, 3 industrial representatives from the C10 electrical industry, C46 solar industry, and the California building officials each provided expert testimony on proper classification to install battery energy storage systems. At least 80 people, I think it was a lot more than that, Chief, then provided individual testimony on both the presentations by industry experts and the topic of the proper classification to install energy storage systems. The CSLB staff has scheduled a follow-up meeting to hear additional expert opinion from C46 and C10 representatives on October 1st, 2019. A ledge committee meeting to follow up on this item and other ledge issues is scheduled for November 7th in Sacramento. Now, let me get to that page. On pages 180 through 216 of your packets is a detailed summary of that meeting, which must be approved by the board. But legal counsel is requesting a revision on page 213. What you got?
So if you look at the top where it says staff comment and it says Council Shields asked if the members foresee working on this proposal. So I propose deleting from about how the work on this issue would proceed in legislative to delete that phrase and replace it with for how this issue would be addressed so that it reads, Council Shields asked if the members foresee working on this proposal before presenting it to the board for full consideration so that the legislative committee would work on the details for how this issue would be addressed. Period. To reflect the actual comment that I did make at the committee meeting.
Still getting to that page. There we go. So you're requesting your comment be amended?
Correct.
Okay. Just to be on the safe side, does anybody in the public side have a problem with that revision? Board, anybody want to comment on that revision? I know.
I just want to
We're
repeat
just
it.
being safe. Okay.
Can you repeat it, please?
Council Shields, I did watch the video, by the way. Council Shields asked if the members foresee working on this proposal before presenting it to the board for full consideration, comma, so that the legislative committee would work on the details for how this issue would be addressed, period. That's what I proposed, that how it reads, as opposed to about how the work on the issue would proceed in legislative. I don't know what that means,
Okay.
but that's not what I said.
So with that revision, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the August 6th, 2019 Legislative Committee Meeting Summary Report.
So moved.
Yeah, I said that with the revision. So I have a motion.
Second.
There's a motion, a second. On the question, from the public? Nobody. From the board? Nobody. Kayla?
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese. Frank Altamura.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
David Diaz.
Yes.
Susan Granzella. Mike Layton. Nancy Springer. Motion carries.
All right, number 2, update on previously considered 2019 through 2020 pending and enacted legislation. We're now on page 218 of your packet. Yes.
I'm sorry. We have lots of public comment on that past agenda item. I thought you were asking for public comment just on this modification, so we can get up to address the board.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Captain Richard Burt, and I'm a firefighter. I'm an immigrant from England, and I came to the States 30 years ago, and I've been serving the American people as a firefighter for 29 years. I'm a proud union member of the International Association of Firefighters. And basically, I've been serving the American people for 29 years. And I've been involved with solar and renewable energy and resiliency for over 2 decades. And I was actually in Paradise with the Cal Fire Chiefs 4 days after that fire.
Excuse me,
So-
sir.
Yeah.
What we approved was the minutes and the summary report.
Okay.
We're not taking any testimony on that agenda item. If there's something you want to review or change, but this is not for testimony. This is the summary report of what happened.
Okay, so at this point, what I want to point out is I'm basically saying that I've studied the solar industry and the problem with the C46 and the C10. That's the issue, correct? Or am I wrong?
The issue is the minutes, basically, we approved the minutes. That's what we were talking about. Do you have an issue on the minutes?
The minutes as in the change that,
Summary report. So there's a summary report, which is basically the minutes of what happened on that date.
yes,
That's what we approved.
okay.
Yes.
So
Attorney.
the other item that's on the agenda is the motion. So if he wants to speak to the licensing committees, the status update on the motion, that would be the other opportunity for
Well,
public comment.
do you want to talk about the motion?
Yes, that's what I'm going to talk about. That's what I'm establishing is the fact that I'm studied and have studied the solar industry for over 2 decades, and I teach thousands of California firefighters about renewable energy, especially the battery systems and solar and how it's connected. And this motion is about that. This is about safety. The reason they want to change this is for the safety factors, and that is what I teach. That is my environment. That's where I live. I live in that space of life and death and safety. And I've established that through my research, my working with all the industries, and seeing what the safety record is. And I'm here to say this. This is my statement to the board. California has done an absolutely fantastic job with renewable energy. I've been watching this testimony and seeing what the change is. And basically, you've got to understand as a board, you have done an amazing job with safety. The last 40 years, the installation safety record should be the boilerplate. I'm teaching firefighter safety at this level, the life and death level of the installation of batteries and storage. That's what I teach. I interrupted a course. I'm in Riverside right now, teaching the thin blue line that protects Californian residents. I'm teaching right now. I interrupted my course to come here to talk about that motion.
Thank you, sir. Your 3 minutes are up. Next.
Bernadette Del Chiaro, Executive Director of the California Solar and Storage Association. I do want to comment about the minutes in this report. On page 215, it reflects Board Member Albanese's comments about how the scope of the regulations to be discussed between stakeholders and staff is to remove the restriction to have the regulations be limited just to residential, and instead focus on size, complexity, voltage, and risk. The motion seems to have been revised despite a lot of back and forth before your committee on August 6th to make sure that the motion was amended to expunge residential restrictions from the scope of the regulations. We remain really concerned about where these regulations are headed. We do not believe you have enough substantial evidence to restrict the trade of the C46 license holders from doing what they have done for 40 years with an amazing track record. And, you know, when this was first raised before licensing committee in February of 2018, and I first sat down with staff to understand the scope of this regulatory potential change, I assumed what we would do is restrict the C46 license holders from doing behind-the-meter solar and storage systems, because the regulations currently in place do not actually clarify in front of the meter or behind the meter. I had no idea that this would get so out of control so as to be suggesting that the C46 should be restricted to residential systems of any size. Facts that I tried to present to the committee on August 6th include information about the size and scope and complexity of residential systems. There is no reason to restrict. Residential is a zoning rule and it is a ratepayer class. From the perspective of the size and voltage and risk and complexity, residential is an arbitrary distinction. We have residential systems that are in excess of 150 to 300 kilowatts. Some of them go up to 900 kilowatts, really, really large residences. I can show you the database. We have multifamily housing projects that are in the 150 to 900 kilowatt range. There is no safety difference between a 10 kilowatt system and a 20 kilowatt system. This is arbitrary, the lines you guys are drawing, and you're going to harm businesses, small businesses. The vast majority of our market is being driven by small and medium-sized businesses, folks that have taken their all their morning to come here and talk to you today. This is very, very
Bernadette.
frustrating for us, and we
Thank
would
you.
really like this
Time's
to
up.
be issue.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Richard Markson on behalf of the Western Electrical Contractors Association with C10 and C7 contractors. We sympathize with the challenge that your committee and staff has to figure this out. And in reflection, the creation of the C16 out of the C36 a couple of years ago was a very simple thing in comparison to what you are grappling with today. But in light of the discussion that we had earlier today about the decline of renewals, I think WECA would caution the board about disenfranchising currently qualified and licensed contractors by reducing the scope of their work. It is a challenge, although something that you are faced with coming and bringing back to the board, but we sympathize with the plight that you find yourselves in. Thank you.
I'm an electrician, so I should know how to do. Thank you. My name's Norm Nielsen. I want to thank you for being here today. I'm not sure if the board has ever been in Chico and have met as a board in Chico before. So congratulations and welcome to Chico. I'm second generation electrical contractor, born and raised in Chico, seen the growth of both the town, obviously, and the university and how they work together. I'm here today to reinforce what Bernadette has said already, that I'm not, I've been in business for 40 years. I don't quite understand why we're limiting a classification, the scope of a classification that's been successful for 40 years. It's nonsensical to me why the board is doing this. I realize that we're talking here and we may be backing up a little bit here, but it is for a market situation to limit a successful classification when there's a big demand. You know, I asked the question, why are we doing that? And why do we have another regulation? You know, to go along with the same theme that we've been talking about as far as less labor, why are we limiting the fact that we can't, you know, provide more incentives to bring more labor in, not to take it away? And I feel like this regulation will do that. I want to commend, I should have started out this way, because from, you know, growing up here and been in business for a long time, and Nancy, and I want to commend or chime in on her commendation that was done earlier. And, you know, her involvement with the building department here in Butte County, she brought efficiency, she brought prioritization and streamlining to the permitting process, and I want to thank you for that, and we're going to miss you here in Butte County. So I think that's about all I'd like to say for now.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to say a few words today. My name is Alex Ward. I'm the Director of Engineering and Operations for FAFCO here in Chico. We're the oldest and largest solar thermal manufacturer in the United States. But today I'm not here to talk about our company and what we do. I'm here to talk about myself and about, on behalf of myself as a fire victim and somebody who's looking to rebuild my home and my community in Paradise. It's my understanding that the board is meeting here in Chico today to help deter fraudulent contractors from taking advantage of homeowners like myself and people who lost their homes and their communities due to the Camp Fire. I really appreciate your work, and I believe that this is a very diligent effort on your part. But one thing that I would like to bring to your attention, or that's already to your attention, but second what Bernadette was just talking about, is an issue that's critical to our future. And that it was the effort that you guys are taking to limit the C46 contractors from installing energy storage solutions. I've been involved with solar installations for most of my life, and I believe that these solar contractors, the C46 contractors, are the most qualified contractors to install energy storage solutions. So what I'm trying to say is that I believe that this effort is in vain and that you should not pursue this unjustified work of limiting the experienced C46 contractors from giving consumers greater energy independence from PG&E. One of the many reasons that I chose to live in California is that we're a progressive state and that we're leading the change in renewable energy. And I believe that our upcoming solar mandate for 2020 is proof of that drive. And we are, as people from Paradise, looking to incorporate all that solar and everything into our homes as we rebuild. It is important that we have the cost-effective and affordable resources available, which C46 contractors provide. Along with cost, I would say that C46 contractors are the best people for the job, and I urge you to not restrict the C46 license from doing what they have been doing for 40 years. If you do, you'll be harming communities like mine that we're trying to rebuild and increasing the cost and making it ineffective for us to install energy storage solutions and solar installations in the future. I really do believe that we need to do everything in our power to allow us to have clean energy alternatives to PG&E and other energy providers. Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Tim Hammer from Alternative Energy Systems here in Chico, California. We're a 15-year local business. We employ 75 people, and we just have a happy company. I, too, want to echo the concerns of the three people prior to me arriving to the stand here. I think it's really going to be a negative impact. It'll make energy storage residentially very cost prohibitive for most people. It'll only make it available to a select few. As far as the safety concern, we've done dozens of these units, and I see no issue with the license C46, which I hold, and my business partner actually holds a C10, so effectively this new rule potentially wouldn't impact us. Norm is a C10 person advocating for this, so I can kind of, if you can get perspective on people that really have a full understanding of the technology, the nature of the installation, I think it would just be a big mistake on your part to move forward with this move. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Two more people. Go ahead, ma'am. Talk. Turned it off. When the red light is on, it's turned on. There you go.
There you go. Should be a green light, right? Hi, my name's Loretta Weber. I'm the Executive Director at Valley Contractors Exchange here in Chico. We're the local builders association for the construction industry. And I'd like to echo the concerns to the previous folks here. We do feel it'd be inhibiting the residential side to restrict the C46 licensing. So with that, you know, maybe there could be some sort of conversation outside of this meeting, maybe bring the stakeholders together to have a little more in-depth conversation to then find the drawbacks to both sides, because we certainly do sympathize with this board and the decision that you folks have to make. But again, we feel it would be very restrictive. As the other gentleman just said, we need all the help we can get. We have a massive town to rebuild, and I just don't believe that the members in my association would support this. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi there, I'm Lauren Randall. I'm a Director of Policy and Market Development for Sunrun Solar Company. Sunrun is the #1 residential solar company in the country, and I was hoping that it wouldn't be me standing up here today, but I was trying to get one of our installers to come, and they are currently working 6 days a week to meet the demand in this very area. For residents who are going solar right now, about a quarter of them are opting to install a battery with their rooftop solar. In some parts of California, that's about half of people want a battery. There's no reason, to echo the concerns of the last few people you've heard from, to restrict the market when there's this type of demand. And this is particularly true as we know we're going into a season with proactive power shutoffs. I think that's a huge reason why we're seeing an uptick in demand and wanting backup power. I've done a little bit of modeling with different organizations like Grid Alternatives that specifically wants to service low-income and disadvantaged community members who are going to really need resilient solutions right now as we're seeing more power outages and there's more vulnerability in the communities. So we need to make sure that we're providing as much access to this technology right now, not restricting access. I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your words. Anyone else? Yes, Counselor.
I just want to clarify for the board's information that where we are legally is the committee's currently working the issue. They're just reporting you as requested from the March board meeting. They're reporting back to you on where they are in the process. The committee is simply exploring concepts at this point. There is no regulatory text proposed or pending at this point, and this board has made no decision on this issue. So I want to make sure I correct for the record that the board has not made a decision on this issue, and the committee hasn't made a decision. They've simply asked the board staff to do further study of this issue with certain direction in their motion, which is reflected on page 216, and that's what we're doing. We're just reporting essentially that the staff is doing more work to bring back to the committee, hopefully by November 7th. For further discussion. So just to make sure that the board is clear where we are in this process and no decisions have been made at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. And to clarify the motion that had been made prior, it was to approve the August 6th Legislative Committee meeting summary report with your revision, which was only a report. So, moving onwards, update on previously considered 2019-2020 pending and or enacted legislation. We're now on page 218 of your packet. The board has already voted on all 13 of these legislative measures at its June 2019 board meeting. There's a handout in front of you which states the position that the board took in June with current status of the bills. The board's position on these measures are also reflected from page 218 through 220 of the packet. The status of some of these measures may have changed since the board vote in June. However, staff has not recommended that any of the changes warrant a change in the board's position on any of these bills. Plus, ledge is over, right? Everything's in front of the governor that's going to be there. Therefore, the purpose of this agenda item is to update the board on these measures only, and the board is not being asked to take a position at this time. Of course, it's all in front of the governor at this time. What do you got, Chief?
So I'll just be quick since the board met in June and did decide some of these items. I just wanted to provide an update. You can follow along on your handout or in the packet. First, I want to mention on page 219, item G, SB 144. That is a typo. The board did not oppose that bill. The position was oppose unless amended. That's just for the record. The following bills are dead for this year and carrying into next year. AB 193, AB 544, AB 613, AB 1024, AB 1545, AB 1551, SB 144, SB 556, SB 53. Just to touch on those because particularly Kevin and some other members had comments on some of these. SB 53 would have restricted two-person advisory committees of the board and subjected them to public meeting rules. That would have restricted your IT committee to the Open Meeting Act. That bill died in Assembly Appropriations. AB 613, which the board had supported if amended, would have allowed boards to raise fees once every 4 years per the Consumer Price Index. That bill was held in Senate B and P. SB 144, which I just mentioned a minute ago, that would have restricted the ability of courts to order restitution to consumers in disaster zones. That's still in Assembly Public Safety. And then finally, we talked about the land surveyors bill in June. That remains in Assembly B and P. Now let's go to the bills that are still alive, if you will. AB 1076, the board did vote to oppose this bill. This bill would require DOJ to...
Excuse me, Chief?
Yes.
As you're going through these, I'm assuming they're on the governor's desk.
Yeah.
And let us know if you've written a letter to the governor expressing our concern or support, please.
Sure. So for AB 1076, which is ordered to engrossing and enrolling, that bill again would have required the DOJ to delete criminal records or certain records of arrest. The bill did take an opposition, or the board did take an opposition on that bill, and I did communicate an opposition at various stages to the different committees. After discussion with our ledge chair, we did not, we elected, and with the registrar, we elected not to submit a letter of opposition to the governor. It is before him right now, and we decided not to be among the other groups that are in opposition to that bill. It does hold a large fiscal. It has been amended, but the amendments don't really, I don't think would really change the board's position, which is it's precluding us from seeing certain criminal arrests and criminal convictions that we would have seen before. SB 255, I do have some positive news on that front. This bill would have required CSLB to confer with PUC to identify distributed energy resources contractors. We were removed from this bill at last minute. I can only assume that it's because of our efforts to communicate to the committee and various staffers that we're in the midst of an energy storage discussion right now anyway, and we don't have a means of identifying distributed energy resources contractors because they're not in our classifications. It's a whole another issue. So thankfully we were removed from the bill, so that's good news. That bill is also before the governor. And then finally, there's SB 601. Just real quickly, the board did a vote to support that. It would reduce fees for licensees in disaster zones. That's before the governor now as well. And then, of course, our sunset bill, the most important one, would extend our sunset date to January 2024, require us to webcast meetings, which we currently do, study whether the $15,000 contractor's bond is sufficient. It would allow civil judgments to be imposed on individuals versus entities for the purposes of license suspensions. And then finally, the electrician certification fee of $20 assessed on C10 renewals. That bill is also before the governor, and that's it for the ledge bill update.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from the board? Counselor?
I got a little confused on AB 1076. So are staff going to send a letter to the governor on the opposition for AB 1076 or not?
At this moment, we have not sent a letter in opposition for AB 1076.
So, I mean, I would recommend it only because it would severely limit the amount of information you would be able to get on criminal convictions. It's not just arrests, but felonies and misdemeanors would also be removed from the rap sheet after a certain period of time has passed without a reconviction in another offense. So I just...
Duly noted, and
seriously.
after we give the public their opportunity, we'll bring it back and talk about that. So board, any other comment? No? Public, any comment? Yes, sir.
Damon Conklin with the Sacramento Regional Builders Exchange. I'll keep my remarks brief with brevity in mind. I just wanted to thank the registrar and the staff this legislative session. They've done an outstanding job of guiding the legislation and maintaining a line of communication with industry stakeholders. We recognize the importance of a well-regulated industry to promote safety and compliance, and we continue to look forward to work with the registrar and staff to deal with the issues in 2020. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you hit that button because we lose our mics up here?
Nope, it's on.
Perfect, thank you. Makes it easier here. Okay, so now we're bringing it back. Counselor has a fair point that we should write a letter on AB 1076. What do you think, Chief? Got an opinion on that?
Just that, we were kind of the lone opposition in our realm of boards and bureaus. We were by ourselves with a law enforcement association on that bill. The AG didn't really come out on it, other than attaching a large fiscal. And we submitted our opposition throughout and spoke with different staff and some of our brethren, and nobody else came out with us. And so I think from a political standpoint, I was seeking advice from our esteemed chair and our executive leader here on whether the letter should go out from a political standpoint, and I think we decided to hold on to it.
Okay, board, you got both sides of the story. I'm not in favor myself of sending a letter because I don't want to be the lone wolf in this. But it's up to you. Any board discussion, or chair would entertain a motion to write a letter if that's your so desire. Okay, no motion. Thank you. Moving on to page 382, review, discussion, and possible action to pursue legislation to enact the residential remodeling and home improvement license classification. Once again, page 382 is a legislative proposal that would create a new residential remodeling home improvement contractor license classification. The scope of classification would be limited to contracts for 3 or more trades or crafts with specified limitations as described on page 386 of your packet. Anything, Chief?
Yeah, I just actually to point Frank mentioned the last session, this was an opportunity for us to gain a lot of feedback on applications with respect to the B applicants who, those who don't have structural experience, really do have a difficult time getting through our license application process, and really the only license for them is a B. So this proposal, staff did meet with stakeholders and collected data to develop this proposal. It's been many years in the making, as you know. I think we finally got it right as far as the language. I do want to point to a typo on page 385. That language there, and of course we work with the author in the event the proposal goes through to massage the language, but there's a typo, the word unless, the first unless, it's smack dab in the middle of the page. Just strike it out. It reads, this residential remodeling and home improvement contractors shall not take a prime contract for any project unless that includes, delete that unless. So this classification would be limited to residential wood frame structures. It reads similar to the definition of the B general contractor right now, except that the principal contracting business, instead of in connection with 2 unrelated trades, it's in connection with 3 unrelated trades or crafts, and no structural alterations will be permitted, unlike the current B. In addition, the C10, the C20, and the C36, which is respectively the electricians, the HVAC, and the plumbers, this classification will be limited with regard to all 3 of those classifications. The limitation will be on finished work only, not on the rough and the extending new construction. The type of work of those classifications will still remain with those classifications. On this point, we do need to iron out some of the language in terms of working with the legislature and industry, if this does go through, on making sure we have the right sort of finished work in here, and that can all be worked out. But really, the main benefits of this proposal is we believe it'll increase the licensed population. We do believe that we have an opportunity to regulate a large class of people who are working in residential communities right now for which there's no license available. And I can speak personally, I worked in the app units for 5 months. It was awful to continue to have to deny people who have plenty of multi-trade experience but no build-out, footprint-changing, structural framing experience. And finally, we believe it's just going to bring a number of individuals out of the underground economy. So that's where we're at with this proposal.
Very good. Licensing Committee reviewed this item at the August 6, 2019 committee meeting and voted to send the proposal to the full board. We'll review the Licensing Committee's recommendation in just a moment, but at this time, is there any questions from the board? Anything from the public? All right. Here it is. Licensing Committee recommendation is that the full board approve the legislative proposal for a new license classification in statute and authorize staff to seek an author to carry the legislative proposal, as well as delegate to the registrar the authority to make any technical and minor non-substantive changes to the proposed language as may be necessary. The proposal will include a new B1 residential remodeling home improvement contractor classification, which would include the following concepts. The B1 classification scope would include 3 or more trades, crafts with the following restrictions. Limit to working on existing residential wood frame structures, cannot make structural alterations to load-bearing partitions and walls, cannot install or extend electrical or plumbing systems, but can make modifications to existing systems. For example, install recessed lighting or alter plumbing for 2 shower heads. Cannot install or replace an HVAC system. Applicants, licensees must comply with CSLB experience, examination, license, bond, and workers' compensation insurance requirements. This recommendation comes to the board as a fully formed motion. It needs no first or second. Does the board have any questions on this? Any questions from the public? Kayla?
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Frank Altabura.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
David Diaz.
Yes.
Susan Granzella. Mike Layton. Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Oh, motion carries.
All right, review, next part is page 388. Review, discussion, and possible action to pursue legislation to increase the minor work licensure exemption for contracting. It's currently under $500 for labor and materials. So as you'll see on page 388, there's a legislative proposal that would raise the current minor work exemption from the contractor license requirement from $500 to $1,000. Chief?
First, I don't know what's going on with all these typos, but on page 389, the legislative committee recommendation, this actually came to the licensing committee in August, so go ahead and scratch out legislative and write licensing. Now, as to the proposal, it ties in nicely with the last one we just heard. Under existing law, a contractor's license is not required for work or operation on one undertaking or project by one or more contracts if the aggregate price for labor, materials, and all other items is less than $500. Well, that amount has not changed since 1988 when it was $300. It's been 21 years. The staff looked at it, adjusted for future inflation and the CPI, $1,000 is the appropriate amount, it seems to us. The benefit of this really, it enables enforcement to focus on more egregious violations and offset the issue of, finding someone to work on your house for under $1,000. So we thought this proposal tied in nicely with the minor home improvement proposal.
So we reviewed this licensing committee reviewed this item on August 6, 2019, and voted to send the proposal to full board. In a minute, we'll talk about the licensing committee's recommendation. Is there any board comments so far? Any public comments? All right, the board approved, here's our recommendation. The board approved this legislative proposal to raise the minor work exemption to $1,000 and authorize staff to seek an author to carry the legislative proposal. This recommendation comes as a fully formed motion. Anything from the board? Anything from the public? Kayla?
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese. Aye. Frank Altamura.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
David Diaz.
Yes.
Susan Granzella. Mike Layton. Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, page 392. Review, discussion, and possible action to pursue legislation to amend Business and Professions Code 7141.5, retroactive renewals. As you'll see on page 392, there's a legislative proposal that would modify the rules for retroactive renewal. What you got, or for expired licenses? What do you got, Chief?
Just that the current standard is not fair to licensees. It's difficult for staff to apply. In order to retroactively renew your license within 90 days, you have to demonstrate through facts that the failure to renew on time was out of your control. It's not fair to ask our technicians to determine what was out of a licensee's control when, in fact, we can expedite this renewal process for people that are a day or two late or up to 90 days. This proposal would allow us to do that. It actually is modeled after a statute for the medical board, which has an up to 6-month retroactive renewal. So this will sort of expedite renewals for people that are a couple days late.
Thank you. Ledge Committee reviewed the item on August 6 and voted to send a proposal to the full board. Any questions from the board?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Just clarifying, so what we're saying is that when their license expires, they get 90 days from the expiration date to submit it?
If they pay all the required fees and submit it on a form approved by the registrar and get it in within 90 days. And they can already do that, but the problem is they have to prove to staff that the failure to renew on time is out of their control, and that's been really difficult for us to apply.
Anything else from the board? Anything from the public? All right, here's a fully formed motion. Oh, go ahead.
Phil Vermeulen. I think this is very important. Right now, what happens on the day after a license expires is it says expires on there. And if they've received, the license board has received the renewal, it'll say received but not yet processed. Well, that's great, but I'm pulling a building permit, I can't get a permit. And I can't tell you, I've literally had guys crying on the phone calling me about this. It's very important. This is probably one of, this and the remodeling license today are the two big things that I think that we're making a lot of progress. So please vote yes for it. Thanks.
I apologize, Richard Markson, back on the previous question about the handyman increase from 500 to 1,000. Right now, a contractor is required to use a written contract for contracts above $500. So would the home handyman in that $500 to $1,000 range also be required to use a written contract? Just a question.
Registrar?
No, what we're saying by raising the so-called handyman exemption up to $1,000 is we would not regulate them, so there would be no regulation to require them to have a written contract up to $1,000.
It seems like the consumer is definitely going to be at risk in that window.
Thank you for your words. All right, moving on. The full board, Legislative Committee recommendation is that the full board approve the legislative proposal that simplifies the rules for processing a retroactive renewal at Business and Professions Code, Section 7141.5, and authorize staff to seek an author to carry the legislative proposal. It comes as a fully formed motion. Board, you have any comment? Public, you have any comment? No. Kayla?
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese. Brian Altamura.
Aye.
Augie Beltran. David Diaz. Susan Granzella. Mike Layton. Nancy Springer. Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we're on page 396 of your packet. Discussion and possible action to consider changes to previously proposed text and reauthorization of a regular rulemaking that changes CSLB regulations. Once again, page 396 of your packet. It relates to AB 2138, which was passed in 2018, which affects CSLB's ability to deny individuals a license or registration on the basis of criminal conviction or professional misconduct. As a result of the bill, CSLB needed to amend its regulations. At its March 21st, 2019 meeting, this board approved the proposed regulation language to regulatory language to effect this necessary change. Chief Jay will now briefly explain this matter. Briefly. Explain.
Yes. You'll just note that on page 396 and 397, there's 9 changes. They have the word technical or substantive next to them. Really, for these, the word technical, or the technical changes are we're adding the word registrant alongside the word licensee in the reg, because we regulate licensees and registrants. So that's the majority of these changes. It was left out of the draft regs, the word registrant. Yeah, registration. And then another change is to reconcile some of the use of the Penal Code Section 1203.42 was left out by accident. And then we have one major substantive change, which deals with how we treat those who are trying to reinstate a revoked contractor's license versus those who are just applying for a license. And Christy will mention the legal issue there.
So if you look at page 405 in your packet, item subdivision C, we're going to be adding the words relating to licensees or registrants, because when we first presented this text to you back in March, we didn't specify whether we were going to treat petitioners for reinstatement like licensees or registrants and apply the more rigorous rehabilitation criteria, or we were going to treat them like initial applicants who, under AB 2138's amendments, would get significantly reduced rehabilitation criteria to meet. Because the goal of AB 2138 was to make it easier for initial applicants to enter into licensure. So typically, we actually impose more rigorous standards on petitioners, because remember, these are people who violated while they were a licensee and were revoked or surrendered their license in lieu of discipline. So we want to make sure, we're recommending that you tie the rehabilitation criteria for licensees or registrants to petitioners for reinstatement because of the fact that they have a history of violating the contractor state license law. So that's the recommendation for the substantive change on page 405, subdivision C of the rehabilitation criteria. Any questions?
Thank you. All right, so staff has a recommendation that the board rescind prior proposed text and approve the proposed regulatory text and changes to sections 868, 869, 868.1, 869.5, and 869.9 as provided in the materials, and direct staff to submit all approved text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency for review. If no adverse comments are received, authorize a registrar to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for hearing. Chair would entertain a motion from the board.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions from the board on the motion? From the public? Kayla?
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese. Yes. Frank Altamura.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
David Diaz.
Yes.
Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Mike Layton. Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. This is the one we're looking for. Page 410. Review, discussion, and possible action to amend legislative 2019 through 2021 strategic plan objectives. Chief?
Yes, just quickly, for the board's edification, we're working on all of these regularly. We're only asking to change one date here, but on 3.1, I just wanted to mention, the objective is to collaborate annually with industry and consumer leaders and share new ideas. We intend to do that much more than just once a year. We've already done it a few times this year with respect to all of these objectives. And with regard to item 3.4, Justin mentioned it during the licensing section, but we had a target date of August 2019. Our sunset bill asked us to study this issue and initially set it out in the sunset bill to 2024. We told them we don't need as much time to study bonds. So we got that down to 2021, and that is the new date that we're asking to move this objective to, January 2021.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion that the board accept the changes to the strategic plan target date, specifically item 3.4 regarding research into the contractor's bond mandated by the sunset bill from August 2019 to January 2021. Anybody? Motion and a second. On the question from the board? Public, any comment? Kayla?
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese. Frank Altamura.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
David Diaz. Susan Granzella. Mike Layton. Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And that concludes it. Thank you.
Thank you, Augie. Are there any board comments for for the Legislative Committee? End of it. Any public comments? No. Okay. Moving on, Public Affairs. Agenda item H, page 415. And I will turn it over to our Public Affairs Committee Chair, Susan Grenzella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just looking at the script here, and I thought, I'm on 2 committees. How did that happen? I'm just a lucky girl. So it's the end of the day, but public affairs is the way the world sees us, and I want everyone to give Rick, because he knows more than I do, your undivided attention, because if I see anyone nod off, you're going to have to do jumping jacks. It's the end of the day, but this is an important message. So according to my script, I was able to work as chair on this committee 2 years ago, and I wanted to thank you for yet another assignment here. Also very important, I'd like to officially welcome a new member of our public affairs staff. I don't know if you've noticed, but we have a new person who's behind all the IT equipment over there. Her name is Amy Lawrence. She just started in August with public affairs. It's a new position under Rick, and so that Rick can, with the staff, Amy will take care of the video, the webcast, and has a great deal of experience in state agencies, so it's great to have her here. So thank you, and welcome, Amy. I'd like to also thank you, Rick, for the tour yesterday. It wasn't a tour, that's kind of the wrong word, but by scripting where we were going and pointing out what happened in Paradise, it was enlightening and sad and all of those other things. So we got to see the reconstruction, the first house that they put in after all of that. So thank you for taking care of that. That took some work. So with that, I would like to turn over the presentation to Public Affairs, Rick Lopes.
Thank you, Susan. And we'll go through the program update first. That's starting on page 416. And thank you, Susan, for mentioning that Amy is here, and it's going to enable us to really attack some of the things in our strategic plan that we'll talk about in a couple minutes. But as you look at the bottom of page 416, the other thing that we're very excited about is the construction on our new control room and studio. Our digital media center is almost finished. Actually, this week it's scheduled to wrap up. All the final equipment is being installed. So that's going to enable us really to increase, along with Amy being with us, the amount of video, audio programs, lots of live webinars that we're planning, and training sessions as well for staff. And we'll be able to produce a lot of content for our social media. So we're very excited. On November 7th at the next committee meeting, we're looking forward to being able to show board members what's gone into that and to talk in more detail about our plans. But we've got lots of I think, important things that will also help us as we go on to 417 to reach out. And Dave mentioned earlier the importance of reaching out and providing more services to our licensees. So we're gearing some of these training sessions and webinars towards them, and so we've got lots of plans, and we'll be sharing those as we develop those, but we're very excited on our staff on what we're going to be doing and utilizing that facility. So on 417, I'll just note in the first item with the new website that was mentioned in the IT update, Public Affairs was involved and worked closely with them on that, and we continue to work on that as we make the rest of the website compliant, bring back some of the old content that wasn't compliant. Once it is compliant, then it'll go back up. The other item on 417 is the expansion of the website content. We're in the final developments right now, and we hope to launch in the next few weeks of a new contractor website. So it's going to take some of the things that we talked about that we'll be doing in the new studio, but we're going to have a blog type website. So we're going to still have our quarterly newsletters and other information, but we're going to be updating that on an as-needed basis. So we're going to be, really pushing out more material to the industry and to our licensees, and so we're excited about how that is progressing along. Moving on to 418, I'm not going to go through all the social media, but I do want to mention, as you can see, there's lots of pretty pictures and graphics on there, and those are there just to really show you a lot of work that our staff is going into on social media, and it really makes a difference. Having graphics and videos really helps increase the engagement and the impressions and the people that are interacting with us and actually going through the materials. So we've got staff that are spending a lot of time on this, and we're seeing a lot of positive effects as a result of that. I did want to mention for the board as well as we have started a second Twitter page, and that's going to focus solely on news. We were concerned that we were putting a lot of information on our Twitter page that might turn the media off because we didn't want to clog up their inbox. So we're going to have a separate Twitter account just for press releases and things of media interest. So we'll be able to report on that in the weeks and months ahead as that thing launches. I'll just jump up to 423. And I'll note there on the bottom there, the press events, it was mentioned earlier during enforcement, talking about our joint task force that we're working with the PUC, with the Department of Business Oversight, the Fresno County District Attorney's Office. We did hold a press event last Thursday in Parlier in Fresno County. Earlier in the packet, you saw the informational bulletin that was sent out last week to all 300,000 electricity homeowners, their customers in all of Fresno County. And one of the main reasons why is we noted with all of the solar complaints, the 2,700 solar complaints that we got over the last 3 years, 198 of them were filed from Fresno County. Not an unusual ratio, but we found that 25% of those came from this one small town of Parlier, which is a population of about 15,000. So that was a quarter of our complaints from Fresno and solar. So we went to this step, and I think our partnership is really working well. We have a really good working relationship with PUC, Business Oversight. The DA's office also, I would want to note too that the industry, Burnett and her folks are very involved in this and have been a great partner. We've had the utilities, PG&E, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric have been involved. They've all had an opportunity to work with us and to fine-tune this bulletin. So that partnership, I think, is really going well. But it did show how important it is that we try to do some more outreach because there are people, especially in low-income areas of Fresno County. So we did this press conference to try to draw people's attention as they start receiving this in the mail, not just to think it's junk mail, but actually to open it. And I will be brief about this, but I did want to go ahead and play just one of the media stories that was aired in Fresno. It runs about 2 minutes, so give me just a second, we'll get that.
Gold Resort and Casino. We don't just have fun. We win. Best local casino, best buffet, best Italian, plus
Spanish-speaking residents in Parlier have been hit hard by the scam. 300,000 notices are being sent out to Fresno County utility customers who may be considering solar. They urge people to ask questions and not rush, check the contractor's license, get competing bids, get everything in writing, and know you can cancel your contract within 3 days.
My panels are not installed, they're not working properly.
Solar power contractors put up a few panels, never connected them, and never came back. They also had Emily Ramirez take out 2 loans for over $32,000 each.
I was able to clear 1 loan, and then I'm stuck with one, which I owe like $44,000 with interest.
Of the 198 people in Fresno County who have filed complaints with the state about solar systems, 50 came from this neighborhood in Parlier. The Public Utilities Commission and State Contractor Licensing Board are now investigating.
What we're finding out that's happened is they sell you a solar system that you can't afford. They tell you the system is part of a government-funded program and is going to be paid for through your property taxes. What they don't tell you, that's actually in addition to your property taxes.
The board has already revoked 5 licenses during the investigation, but worries there could be more victims. The city of Parlier is now taking steps to try to prevent more incidents.
Is once a contractor comes in to get a permit for the solar, our department will actually call the homeowner to make sure they understand what they're actually signing up for.
Yes, it's a very stressing and very frustrating to know that you've been victim of fraud.
And Parlier is not the only smaller community dealing with this problem. 12 complaints came from Sanger, 11 in Reedley, and 5 more in Huron. Dale, you're wrong. ABC 30.
You can ignore what's behind me then. Yeah, and I should mention too, is in addition to the partners, we also had a group from the Dolores Huerta Foundation was there, and there's some legal aid groups that have helped out. And I think we've talked a lot in past meetings about this. I know you're familiar with the situation. But we did get a lot of coverage. There was all the main network affiliates and Univision had a station there as well. And so we did get a lot of coverage, and hopefully people are going to actually read through that, and that will have an effect in Fresno County. As we move on to, I'll just move over to 425 with our senior scam stoppers. I do want to thank Kevin Albanese. He was at a senior scam stopper we held on the 16th last week in Saratoga. I believe, Kevin, we had 150 or so people there, so it was a big audience. You can see that the schedule coming up between now and the end of the month, and then some of the consumer scam stoppers. And finally, of course, our intranet, which is for our employees only. That work does continue. That concludes the public affairs update.
Do any board members have a comment? Any comment from the public? All right, our next, on page 427, we have our strategic plan objectives. Rick and I met earlier, and we were talking about these at length, and I think Rick can present them because they are near and dear to his heart. But thank you.
Yes, near and dear. I'll just note a couple of them, since we do have partnerships with other divisions on this. Item 4.4 was spoken about earlier with the most wanted feature, so that is continuing. We're looking to create some kind of a press outreach later in the fall. 4.5, we've done our background. We're going to plan to present this to the Public Affairs Committee at our meeting next month. I'm sorry, no, in November. And on 4.6, we're expanding the website. I mentioned that earlier about the new contractor website. The other things are going a little bit further out, but we are already starting to do some of our work. And we see we have 3 minutes till we're supposed to end this meeting, so we're right on time. Unless anybody has questions, those are the main highlights.
Thank you, Rick. Does anyone from the public have comments? Any comments from the board? Thank you. Mr. Chair, that concludes.
Thank you. Before we get into adjournment, I want to thank Kevin Albanese for the snacks today. Very cool. Good job. And that does conclude our business, so can I get a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
A motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? Take the roll.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Yes.
Frank Altamura.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
David Diaz.
Oh, yeah.
Susan Granzella. Mike Layton. Nancy Springer.
Meeting's adjourned.